prescribed treatment or the treatment ended more than 14 days ago. All right. So, because remember, look back at the question. Has the patient been treated for a UTI in the past 14 days? Not did they have one, but were they treated for one? So code 1, yes, is they've been prescribed an antibiotic, again, in the time frame, the past 14 days, specifically for a confirmed UTI, for a suspected UTI, or they developed one while they're on prophylactic treatment. Okay, so again, even if it's just suspected, hey, doc, there's a really foul odor, let me quick call in a prescription. Haven't even run a lab yet. We're just going to call it in because this patient maybe just has a history of this nonsense. We're going to have that coded yes and make sure the clinician is coding that as a yes because they were treated. And of course, NA is they're only on prophylactic treatment, nothing going on here. M1610 is talking about urinary incontinence, or do they have any kind of device? Incontinence, we know, is defined as the involuntary leakage of urine. I'm sure you moms out in the audience can understand what that's all about. It identifies also, this item does, the presence of urinary incontinence or a condition that requires urinary catheterization of any type, including whether that's just intermittent or indwelling. So we have the three choices there of 0 is you're marking it either there's no incontinence or this patient has some type of ostomy for urinary drainage, or they don't pee. You know, maybe someone's on so controlled with their dialysis, they have anuria, right? 1 is the patient's incontinent, and 2, they require that urinary catheter. And it talks about specifically, which means we can only look at these types: external, indwelling, intermittent, or suprapubic. So the 0, the no incontinence, right? Again, anuria, or they have some type of ostomy, you know, perhaps it's an ileal conduit, or a pouched urinary diversion. There's the different types there. Code 1, incontinent at any time. It doesn't matter how often it happens, just if it happens, it counts. All right. So even if it's, well, it's only when I sneeze. Well, you know what? That's incontinent. If they're on a timed voiding program, make sure that clinician, you know, if you see that it's documented that the patient's on a timed voiding program, this is going to be coded as a 1 because that is a management program. It does not cure the incontinence. It merely manages it. Your code 2 requires a urinary catheter. And again, specifically, these are the only ones we're allowed to look at. So this is whether or not it's an intermittent or a continuous use of that catheter is needed, whether it be for retention or incontinence. It doesn't matter why they have it, just the fact that they have a device is what's being looked at. But if you see in the documentation that the catheter or the tube is being used to drain urine, even if it's intermittent, unless it's capped with no plan to drain urine, make sure that's being checked off there, right? So even if, you know, the patient's doing their own self-cats during the day, that still counts. That's intermittent. M1620 is your bowel incontinence frequency. And the NA, of course, is that the patient has an ostomy for bowel elimination. So we're not going to be looking at bowel incontinence, obviously, because they have an ostomy. So something else is taking care of that need. And so we want to make sure that if we're coding, you know, diagnosis coding, say, hey, they've got a colostomy, whatever it is, you know, let's make sure that NA has been checked appropriately. M1630 is the ostomy for bowel elimination. So after you've answered 1620, you know, it's either had some degree of bowel incontinence or NA. Either way, you land on the next item, which is 1630, and it's either 0, I don't have an ostomy, so, you know, move along. You know, I don't know why none of those became a skip point to just blow you past this one for, you know, anything, but 1 is the patient's ostomy was not related to an inpatient stay and did not necessitate a change in their medical or treatment regimen. Or 2, the ostomy was related to an inpatient stay or did necessitate a change in their medical or treatment regimen. So this, of course, applies to any type of ostomy for the bowel elimination. You know, it could be a colostomy, could be an ileostomy. Their code 2, where it was related or necessitated a change, remember, if you're seeing that this patient was in the hospital, and had a colostomy, maybe they went back to the hospital for whatever reason, and they had maybe C. diff or something with diarrhea going on. Trust me when I say they had to change up their treatment regimen regarding this ostomy, and that would necessitate code 2, okay? Even though they did not go to the hospital because there was something wrong with the ostomy, it did necessitate a change in their medical or treatment regimen because of the condition that they had. The ostomy had to be changed more frequently. So that would apply for code 2. And I think that one gets missed time to time on everyone's end, clinician and some reviewers. All right, so that's it for section H. Nothing new there. Yay, right? Finally, here's our coding. We're like halfway through the OASIS, and we finally run into where the codes are hiding down in section I, active diagnoses. Haven't changed these at all. They're still the exact same, M1021, M1023. Nothing new there. This is just where they're hiding now. It's down here in section I. We still have M1028. Right, which talks about, does the patient have an active diagnosis of either PVD, PAD, or diabetes? What is now missing for some unknown reason from the new guidance manual is all the numeric codes, the ICD-10 codes that they associated with these. They said we're PVD for anything that started with an I-73 or I-70s for the PADs, things like that. All that's missing in the guidance manuals. So we're like, what does that mean? Does that open the door to other things? We don't know. We have questions and we're waiting to find more specific answers. We just want to know what happened to the code list that used to be there. It's just kind of weird to us. So right now we're still, we've got another, 7 weeks to try and get more specific answers on this. So, stay tuned. I will keep in touch with you guys about this stuff. But right now, the codes are missing. We don't know why, but same item. And then, of course, the diabetes. And I just left those in just because it's diabetes. And it's just to show that they're not talking about just type 1 and type 2 diabetes. This is all things diabetes. However, is it due to something else, like another condition? Or is it due to a drug or chemical, like a steroid? Or is it an other specified, which is, where we remove the pancreas, now they're diabetic, right? So this is just all things diabetes would be your code 2. So nothing new there. M1033, this is where they hit it, okay? Because we're in section J, which is health conditions now. So M1033, the risk for hospitalization has not changed. All right, no new guidance. It's still, out of these top 7, rows 1 through 7, 4 of those selected will bring you points to the functional impairment level. Has not changed at all. Rows 8, 9, and 10 are excluded from that computation. And everything else is still there. Everything's still broken out into its, what are you considering now versus looking back 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Has not changed. So let's just take a quick reminder of what that is. Your code 1, your history of falls. We're looking at 2 or more falls or any fall with an injury in the past 12 months. So if I tell you I fell 8 months ago and sprained my wrist, or I got a skin tear or something like that, you know what? That counts. That is a fall with an injury. So this includes your witnessed and unwitnessed falls occurring in any location. Didn't have to be just in the home. It could be I was out at the mall 8 months ago and I fell on the escalator. Okay, that counts. Injury, it can include pain, skin tears, sprains, etc. It could be a major injury, broke my leg. So unlike the fall definition in the OASIS, falls resulting from an overwhelming force or falls resulting from therapeutic balance training are considered falls for this item only. So in the J1900 question, which talks about falls, in the J1800, we're looking at Any fall, regardless of whether someone pushed you, you fell on your own, the dog tripped you up, a therapist shoved you a little too hard and you landed on the kitchen counter, all of that constitutes as a fall for this item. Code 2 is an unintentional, and that is the key to this whole thing, unintentional weight loss of a total of 10 pounds or more in the past 12 months. So you want to consider this, the clinician should, when they're weighing the patient for M1060, if this patient says, whoo, look, I'm down so much weight, it's like, okay, tell me about that. So they should be inquiring more, especially if the patient's surprised by their weight, if they're down so much, what's going on? So again, this is about an unintentional weight loss of 10 pounds or more in the past 12 months. Your code 3 is your multiple hospitalizations, which means 2 or more in the past 6 months. So sometimes you can see it in the H&P that they've been bouncing around places, whether it be hospitalizations or the next one is ER units. So on this multiple hospitalizations, only the acute care inpatient hospitalizations, your ACHs, are counted. So we're not looking at SNFs, LTACs, inpatient rehabs, or inpatient psychs. Okay. If they're discharged from one hospital and then readmitted later that day to a hospital, whether it's the same one they bounce right back through the doors on, or they go to a different one in the city, that qualifies as 2 hospitalizations. Observation stays are not considered. It is an actual admission that is considered. Your code 4 is your multiple emergency department visits, again, 2 or more in the past 6 months. So the questions that the clinician need to be looking at is how often did they go to the emergency department and why? All right, and that's also good information. It goes towards their plan of care. What are they addressing there? And just like with the hospitalizations, if they're transferred from one hospital emergency department to a second hospital emergency department, this is counted as 2 emergency department visits. And what is excluded here is your urgent care centers and walk-in clinics. And then we have code 5, which is a decline in mental, emotional, or behavioral status in the past 3 months. And this refers to significant changes occurring that may impact the patient's ability to remain safely in the home and increase the likelihood of hospitalization. So, things that the clinician needs to be looking at and what you might be able to find in the paperwork. Have there been changes in diagnosis symptoms such as depression? Are they getting worse? Are beds being changed up a lot because something's not being managed well? This can be a temporary or a permanent issue. Past UTIs might have a lot of different behavioral status changes going on with those UTIs. I can still remember one of my patients, she would start talking about the monkeys dancing on the ceiling. First thing I did was call the provider, say, hey, we're going to need meds again for a UTI. Yeah, we'll get the nurse out here to get a culture, but yeah, we're talking about the monkeys dancing on the ceiling. She's got another UTI. It's just what she did. She just went off the rails. As soon as she got those meds, she was fine, totally cognizant, just those monkeys. Also things, have there been any difficulties with the medications, with taking them? Is there a reason for that? Are the medication causing any reactions that might be messing with their mental, emotional, or behavioral status? Your code 6 is reported or observed history of difficulty complying with any medical instructions. For example, they give medications, diet, and exercise in the past 3 months. So on the clinician side, they need to be thinking, is this patient a frequent flyer? A lot of times, you're calling them up to set your appointment. Hey, I see you're back. What's going on? You know this patient. You've been there multiple times. You can tell them exactly how to get to their house and where their bedroom is located, right? Even though you haven't seen them for 8 months because you've seen them so frequently. So have they been doing what they were told to do the last time you discharged them, right? Have they followed their meds instructions, their diet restrictions, their weight-bearing restrictions? Does any of this tie into code 5? If they're not being compliant or they're having difficulty with something, is it because of any decline in their mental, emotional, or behavioral status? Do these two tie in together? They might not, but it's just something that needs to be considered. Are they related? Code 7, this patient is currently taking 5 or more medications. You would think this should be the easiest question in the whole entire OASIS to answer, but oh my gosh, the number of times it gets answered wrong, right? So this includes over-the-counter meds, herbals, oxygen, TPN, all those count as medications. So we want to be counting all meds regardless of the patient compliance. The patient says, I see that I have 10 medications prescribed. I'm not picking them up from the pharmacy. I am not taking them. It doesn't matter. For us to answer this item correctly, they are taking 5 or more medications. That is what prescribed. That's the rules that they're supposed to be abiding by. How they take it is a compliance issue. That's on them. But for this item, we have to answer it as it's prescribed. Your code 8. So now we're out of the ones that go towards any point possibility towards functional impairment level, but we still have others that get risk adjusted. And risk adjustment, as we all know, goes towards describing how complex this patient is. When everyone says, hey, my patient's a train wreck, it's risk adjustment that proves that. So we still want to make sure that the clinicians are answering this correctly so that these agencies are getting their risk adjustment points to show that they are indeed train wrecks, because that helps on the whole scheme with outcomes and all the other measures to level that playing field for this agency against all those pretty total hips, total knees, and cabbages that other agencies are taking. So your code 8, the patient currently reports exhaustion. Take a look at M1400. How was that answered? Are there any endurance issues going on? The patient is reporting exhaustion. Why is that? Where is it coming from? How is it being addressed? So, is that coming up in the plan of care? Code 9, other risks not listed in 1 through 8. So here, if the clinician has checked off this box, we want to see documentation of what they are alluding to. So we want to see things that might potentially increase the patient's risk for rehospitalization, such as slow movements, unsafe environments, dialysis treatment that is just wiping them out, blindness, an unstable caregiver, limited financial resources, terminal diagnoses. And some of these will actually, as we go into OASIS E with all those social determinants of health items, reading through those, we'll be getting a better picture of what's actually happening out in that house with these patients. Okay.
You have a question?
Yes.
Do it right quick.
Yeah.
Question is, for number 7 meds, does that include supplements like Ensure, Glucona, or tube feedings? I think we'll capture those on the nutritional part, won't we?
Yes. Yeah. They would not be on your meds list. They're not medications. Those things that you just rattled off.
I'll tell y'all a true story. My husband had throat cancer back in 2012. Had to have a feeding tube. I don't remember what we had. Our insurance, we have Blue Cross, paid for the little, the little containers that you put water in and the big 60cc syringe that you flush it with. They did not pay for the actual tube feeding because they considered it an over-the-counter thing. Yeah, I know, and it was real expensive.
Yeah. There's no explaining a lot of things that happen out there.
On number 9, you said unstable caregiver. Would lack of a caregiver also be counted here?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Especially, if they need one. Yeah. If they don't need one, then I wouldn't worry about that. But yes, if they need one, then the lack of a caregiver is definitely an issue. And that could certainly lead to rehospitalizations. Good questions. Okay, new stuff. Yeah, J05, and I just put an X there because we actually have 3 pain items. So this is the general overall guidance for all 3 of them. The look back period is 5 days. So no longer will it be that nonsense language of recent pertinent past. Like, what does that mean? Okay. Look back period is 5 days. So this pain assessment provides a basis for the evaluation, treatment need, and response to treatment. It provides insight into the need to adjust the timing of pain interventions to help cover sleep or preferred activities. And it prompts a discussion about factors that aggravate and alleviate pain. Assessing whether the pain interferes with sleep or activities provides additional understanding of the functional impact of pain and potential care planning implications. These items should be coded based on the patient's interpretation of the provided response options for frequency. If the patient is unable to decide between two options, then you should code for the option with the higher frequency. All right, and that's a key one to remember there, the higher frequency. So they felt the need to go on to define pain for us, which is any type of physical pain or discomfort in any part of the body. It may be localized to one area or maybe more generalized. It may be acute or chronic, continuous or intermittent, or occur at rest or with movement. Pain is very subjective. Pain is whatever the experiencing person says it is and exists whenever they say it does. Okay. So the first one up, J0510, pain effect on sleep. All right. So the guidance is for the clinician to ask the patient over the past 5 days, remember, 5-day window, how much of the time has pain made it hard for you to sleep at night? Now, 0 comes up, does not apply. I have not had any pain or hurting in the past 5 days. And as you can see, it creates a skip point. It sends you on out to M1400. The problem is there are 3 pain items, 5, 10, 20, and 30. So if this is answered incorrectly, you've blown your chances of getting the rest of the pain assessed. So it's real important that everyone understands that code 0 is for that patient that reports no pain or hurting at any time in the past 5 days. Right? But if that's not what they're saying, they're like, okay, how hard has it made it for me to sleep at night? Okay, then we have, for instance, code 1, rarely or not at all means the patient reports pain or hurting has been present in the past 5 days, but it has rarely or not at all impacted sleep. So it's real important that we're really parsing out that difference between the 0 and the 1. 0 is, I have no pain, stop asking me about pain, move along. 1 is, okay, I'm good, but it's making it hard for me to sleep at night. Okay. That's the difference between a 0 and a 1. And they look so similar. So we just want to be sure about that. Oh, why does it do that? Okay, we're going to play Slido. And now we have the code for a change. OASIS 4, hashtag OASIS 4 on Slido.
Well, while everybody's doing that, Laura brought up a good point that in the OASIS e-manual, it says that nutritional supplements are counted at number 7.
As medications?
But my question is, are they talking about like Insurance Boost, or are they talking about like a supplement you would take in a pill or a capsule form, something like that?
That's what that sounds like, because Insurance Boost is never considered a medication.
Yeah, sorry, y'all, I'm eating chips. We need to clarify that.
Is in the guidance manual, what, under the
M1033, yeah, number 7.
Okay, I'll look that up and I'll look into that. Yeah, it might be that loosey-goosey use of the word supplements.
Sounds weird to me, but we are talking about Medicare, so.
I know. All right, so I will look into that and get back to y'all on that. Okay, so Slido. Okay. The OT assessment indicates the patient had back pain for the last 2 days, but it has not bothered him when sleeping. The OT coded J0510, pain effect on sleep as 0, does not apply. No pain in the past 5 days. Is this correct? You have a 50-50 shot of getting it right. Like watching the numbers crawling through the top. 29, 31, about halfway there. Slowing down. I only have 37 in. Okay. So it was not correct how the OT answered it. Sorry, I just couldn't get my slide to move. It was like, what? Okay. So then if you've answered that one where the patient has some pain affecting sleep, then it's going to start asking you about other times with pain, right? Because you said, okay, there is some pain going on here. So CY2023, pain interference with therapy activities. Again, it's looking at 5 days. How often have you limited your participation in rehab therapy sessions due to pain? So what constitutes a rehab therapy session? So this could be a formal treatment supervised in person by a therapist or a nurse or other staff, or the patient or family or caregivers carrying out a prescribed therapy program without any formal staff present, right? Someone's got their HEP, they're doing it all by themselves. That would constitute therapy activities. And again, we have some key differences between 0 and 1. 0 says does not apply. I have not received rehab therapy in the past 5 days. Code 1 is the patient reports pain or hurting has been present in the past 5 days, but it has rarely or not at all impacted their participation in rehab therapy. So not as crucial a distinction between the CY510, but still a distinction between 0 and 1. And we've got to be sure these clinicians are answering this correctly. Another Slido. The patient is seeing OT for maintenance therapy. Will this be considered for CY520, pain interference with therapy activities? Yes or no? Answers are coming in fast and furious now. Okay, yes, the patient, this pain, if it happens during maintenance therapy, is included. Maintenance therapy is still therapy. What they wanted to do when they sent out this Q&A, that maintenance therapy still counts as, some people were like, well, maintenance is not rehabilitative. Yeah, that's people really splitting hairs, but I mean, they're right. Maintenance therapy is not rehabilitative, but it is considered a therapeutic activity. So they just wanted to be sure that everyone understood. We're still talking about any kind of therapy activities, whether they be rehabilitative or maintenance type. And then we have CY530, the last of the pain items. Now it's pain interference with day-to-day activities. And the question is, again, over the past 5 days, how often have you limited your day-to-day activities, excluding rehab therapy sessions because of pain? And here the code 1, rarely or not at all, is where the patient reports no pain or rarely feeling pain during the day-to-day activities in the past 5 days. So just a reminder, when they talk about things like rarely or not at all, and then occasionally, frequently, almost constantly, and then that last unable to answer, when you have all those choices of ranges for all of these pain items, and the patient's like, they can't really, put their finger on whether it's occasionally or frequently, and they're waffling, the clinician should just be going towards the stronger side, which would be the frequently. You know, the more frequent the patient waffles towards, that's the answer they should be choosing. You always choose towards, falling off the horse on the worst side there. So those are those new pain items. And all I could say is it's about time. I like these new pain items. I think they're going to be easier for clinicians to ask and for the patient to understand what they're being asked instead of the way it is right now, which is a little on the, you kind of have to do some mental gymnastics to really work it out.
I got a question, but first I just got a observation. Back when they started talking about all this and when they took JM1242 away, Medicare did it in response to the opioid crisis because you had that broad pain question that
Right.
MDs were trying to treat, and we were
Right.
giving opioids out like Smarties. So
Right.
I just thought that was interesting too, that was their move to try to do something. Question
Right.
on the pain. Question on the 5-day look back for the pain items and the 5-day assessment time frame. If no therapy in the 5 days preceding the assessment and the day of, J0520 is answered NA, or consider any treatment assessment in the 5-day window.
Okay, so if they haven't had therapy in the past 5 days, then it doesn't apply because 0 says I have not received rehab therapy in the past 5 days.
Okay, so this is Pam. I asked the
Hi.
question. So I was just trying to wrap my brain around the 5-day assessment time frame.
Okay.
So that doesn't apply to the pain items, is what you're saying. So like, let's say the PT comes in the day after the start of care
No, no, no,
and
no,
the
no, no,
patient's
no.
having
Yep,
trouble.
yep, yep,
We're
yep.
not
Nope,
going to
nope,
do that.
nope, nope, nope,
Okay.
nope, nope. These pain items are look back items.
They're only
So we don't
okay.
count the day of
Only
assessment.
look back items.
Only look back. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So day of assessment and look back. Don't be looking forward to what's going to be happening with new services coming in the house. This is a look back item.
So we can look at day of assessment. So day 0 and then go back 5 days.
Well, you have to look back 5 days. So today is day 0. Yesterday is day 1. Go back 5 days. So in the past 5 days.
Okay. So does the day of assessment count?
No.
Like what if the nurse did the start of care and the PT is the same day? No.
Well, and the PT is too late for the start of care. Because when the nurse was there, PT was not out yet. No,
Well,
it's
the
the
day of
past 5.
assessment.
It's the past 5 days.
Yeah. Okay.
But if the family carries out the prescribed therapy in those past 5 days, then it is considered. Yeah, if they had a home exercise program and they did it, you would count that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So the nurse comes in, does the assessment, and oh, my dad hasn't participated in the HEP they gave him at rehab because his shoulder hurts. That's considered. Okay.
And yes, the last 5 days instead of recent pertinent past. Clinicians had the hardest time with recent.
Well, hang on. I'm going to go back to what Pam just blurted out at warp speed. Make sure we understand that. She said he hasn't participated because his shoulder hurt. No. That would be almost constantly then. 0 is they haven't received rehab therapy. That's different from I'm not taking rehab therapy because of pain.
No, at warp speed, my brain was really thinking we would report the pain.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everyone got that distinction. Because what I heard might not have been what they heard, so I just want to be sure.
In my brain, it does make sense.
I just want to be sure we all got that distinction. Yeah, refusing therapy is not the same as not receiving it.
Yes.
Okay, we got one more. One more question. Sorry, Pam, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you say J0510 was not yes, OT was not right in choosing 0?
Right, because 0 is I have no pain at all, move along, find something else to talk about. But this guy does have pain. He has back pain. It just didn't bother his sleep. So 0 would be wrong. It would probably be something else, whatever that frequency is, how often it was bothering his sleep. So the question was the OT coded patient does not apply. Is this correct? No.
Go back and let us look at our answer options. I get confused when they're
Did I
wrong
have the
sometimes.
option marked off wrong? Uh-oh.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, what does that say? The correct code, either one.
No, I meant the question itself.
Oh, no, hang on, I'm just looking at this. Say, why is that?
Background for 2 days, but it's
That
not
wording is weird on there. I'm gonna have to fix that wording. That wording, I don't know what that either word is in there on the no part. So that's the question there.
No. I mean,
Oh,
the
go back
OASIS
to-
question.
Go back to that.
Yeah. Over the past 5 days, how much of the time has pain made it hard for you to sleep at night? So he's had pain over the last 2 days. I say I have to look at the question, talk it out. He's had pain over the last 2 days, but it did not impact his sleep.
So 0 is not correct.
So, and that just says he's not had any pain. That doesn't address the actual sleep. So that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's
so you went with
it's
1.
So no is correct. I have to figure out what this what the heck was I trying to say with this justification there. I got to fix that. Something squirrely there. Slide, you know me, something squirrely. Slide 41, correct it. All right, I'll correct that before it gets uploaded. Okay, good discussions. See, I'm only human. We all
Well, no, I have to look at the question sometime and talk it out from there.
Well, yeah, there you go. So we all make mistakes. I just happen to do mine on a more public platform.
All right, did we get everybody's question? I think we got everybody's questions on pain. That's all right, Arlen.
I don't care. I don't care because I am out of here in, hang on, I got it.
Put your counter down. Put your counter down.
134 days, 2 hours, 48 minutes, and 54 seconds. Yeah, I can't wait to retire. Okay, so then we go back to things that we know. J1800, any falls since the start of care, resumption of care, right? So this is, they're going to report falls that occurred at any time during the quality episode, regardless of where the fall occurred. So it could be here, could be the doctor's office, could be out at Walmart, doesn't matter. So, and it could be either reported or not reported. So again, doesn't matter what the documentation said of whether or not the clinician saw it. You know, it's just that we know about it. Is all that matters. All right. So a reported one is a fall that occurred somewhere during the home health quality episode. That's going to be reported. What is not reported though as a fall? It's anything that occurred during a qualifying inpatient stay. So if we transferred our patient to a hospital and they fell there, hey, that's not on us, right? That's not inside of our quality episode because our quality episode ended when we transferred them and we don't start a new one until we do a resumption of care. So if they fell in the hospital, sorry, but not on us. We will not be reporting that in J1800 because it is not inside our own home health quality episode. Just a reminder of the falls guidance, right? So the definition of a fall is an unintentional change in position coming to rest on the ground, floor, or onto the next lower surface. So that could be a chair arm, right? That would be a fall. I know. Yeah. So it may be witnessed or unwitnessed, reported by the patient or an observer, or identified when a patient is found on the floor or the ground, right? So a falls, now this is the OASIS definition we talked about. An intercepted fall occurs when the patient would have fallen if he or she had not caught themselves or had not been intercepted by another person. This is still considered a fall. And I tell you, I went around and around with the OASIS help desk on this one because I'm like, all right, they caught themselves. That's a good thing, but no, it's apparently still considered a fall. I'm like, okay, all my training for nothing then? You're still going to consider it a fall? Okay. So what are not considered falls? Falls are not a result of an overwhelming external force, such as someone pushing a patient. Except, of course, if we're talking about the M1033 item, right? Falls are different there. CMS understands that challenging a patient's balance and training them to recover from a loss of balance, see, is an intentional therapeutic intervention and does not consider anticipated losses of balance that occur during supervised therapeutic interventions as intercepted falls. So if you see in the documentation, if you're on one of those discharge crews and you see in the documentation that the therapist has been pushing the patient around and there have been some, anticipated losses of balance occurring, those are not falls. That is therapeutic activity. It falls in M1033, but not in J1800. No explaining that. J1900 just talks about the number of falls. So what they're counting is anything that had no injury or minor injuries or major injuries. So anything that was a result of a fall. And they're going to code falls no matter where they occurred, code each fall only once. And if the patient has multiple injuries in a single fall, they should be coding the fall for that highest level of injury. So if I fell and I had a skin tear as well as I broke my wrist, you're only going to mark me under C, major injury. You're going to let that skin tear go. And then finally, we have in section J, M1400, when are they dyspneic or noticeably short of breath? So just a reminder, if the patient uses oxygen continuously, the clinician should be assessing the patient with their oxygen on, because to take it off would be cruel. If they use it intermittently, and this is based on patient use, not per the prescription, but for the patient use of how they're using their oxygen. If they're using it intermittently, then you assess them with their oxygen off. And the reason we want to do that is we want to make sure, because we know this patient is not wearing their oxygen as appropriate, we want to make sure if it's not on, that they're not desaturating. So that might be a way then to convince them that they really should be wearing it more frequently. Because look at this. I'm assessing you with your oxygen off, your O2 sats are 84. That is not a good thing, right? You should be at least 94. So whatever, their baseline should be. So you want to code the patient based on the patient's actual use of oxygen at home, not on the order. And you're going to code 1 is appropriate for demanding bed mobility activities if it's producing dyspnea in the bedbound patient, or physically demanding transfer activities producing dyspnea in the chair-fast patient. This last slide is just some ideas. Does the patient wear oxygen? Is it on the meds list? We catch that one a lot, right? Now, if oxygen is worn at night when they're sleeping due to dyspnea, the score is automatically a 4 because that's the worst possible condition, right? They lay down, they can't breathe. Now, if they have made adjustments to their sleeping position, they put a bunch of pillows, whatever it might be, they sleep in the recliner from now on, so that when they lay down, however far that might be, they no longer get dyspneic, then you have to answer differently than 4. But if they're still insisting on laying down, using the oxygen in bed so that they don't die overnight from lack of oxygen, you're going to code them as a 4. Just a heads up, if you're looking at a chart where the patient has CHF or COPD and oxygen, and the clinician has scored that as a 0, just, really look into that. That's really not typical that they're not getting dyspneic ever. This is just a comparison. This grid here, one of the items coming up, probably our last week, is from the category of O. It's item O0110C1. Yeah. Could they have not made that item number any more difficult than it is? Between the O's and the zeros, we're just going to love that on our computer systems. So M1400, we're going to use this one as determined by the patient, how the patient is using their oxygen. Continuous means they're using it 24/7. Intermittent, it's not 24/7. Doesn't matter what it is, it's not 24/7. Whereas when we get to that item O, there's actually no guidance for how we should be assessing that oxygen use, but they are saying that continuous is for when the oxygen is delivered greater than or equal to 14 hours a day, as opposed to intermittent, which is less than 14 hours a day. So we're going to have the clinician start stepping up on that intermittent use as to how many hours are we actually talking about here. If they're saying they're using it intermittently, because if it's actually all day, but they take it off at night, well, that might be 18 hours. So there's going to have to be some training on the clinician's part that they're going to have to start giving us when they're checking whichever box they're checking in that O0110 item for the oxygen at category C, hopefully they have something to support why they chose C2 or C3, because that's going to be the difference, is that hour breakdown. So yay on that. Let's get those clinicians to document even more than they're already not documenting. Okay, so any questions before I shut this deck down? Anything that I'm going to need to roll back to? No questions, April?
No, I was going to say, anytime I have done OASIS training with an agency or clinicians, I always, I always tell them, you really cannot assess pain or dyspnea if you don't ever get a patient up off of a couch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Got to make them walk.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Got to make them walk. Any other questions?
We'll have a lot when we get started.
Oh, well, yeah, and a lot of it's just going to be based on documentation that we get. All good? All right, we can stop recording.